This story helps English learners practice listening and speaking skills. Moreover, it uses simple words and clear sentences. However, the tale also carries a warm moral. Therefore, learners can enjoy meaning and language together. Long ago, a dark valley lay beyond the hills. Meanwhile, a giant lived there with loud steps. Moreover, villagers feared his angry voice. However, the land still held hope. Therefore, the story begins with tension.
The giant had a wife with a soft heart. Furthermore, she loved flowers and music. However, she hated pain and fear. Thus, she helped animals secretly. Meanwhile, kindness grew quietly.
The castle stood tall and cold. Moreover, shadows filled its halls. However, the wife cleaned and cooked kindly. Therefore, warmth entered stone rooms. Meanwhile, the giant noticed small changes.
She fed hungry birds every morning. Furthermore, she healed injured deer at night. However, she hid these acts carefully. Thus, danger stayed close. Meanwhile, courage stayed stronger.
The giant returned angry each evening. Moreover, he shouted at the wind. However, his wife listened calmly. Therefore, storms faded faster. Meanwhile, fear slowly softened.
She spoke with gentle words. Furthermore, she asked about his pain. However, she never blamed him. Thus, anger lost power. Meanwhile, hearts began to change.
One day, the village faced hunger. Moreover, crops failed after heavy storms. However, the giant planned punishment. Therefore, danger approached quickly. Meanwhile, hope rested with the wife.
She walked to the village alone. Furthermore, she carried bread and seeds. However, fear followed her steps. Thus, bravery shined brightly. Meanwhile, villagers watched silently.
The giant followed her path. Moreover, anger burned inside him. However, he saw thankful faces. Therefore, confusion slowed his steps. Meanwhile, silence filled the air.
She spoke truth without shouting. Furthermore, she showed the hungry children. However, she asked for mercy calmly. Thus, hearts opened. Meanwhile, tears replaced anger.
The giant lowered his head. Moreover, shame touched his face. However, he listened fully. Therefore, change started. Meanwhile, fear faded away.
He helped rebuild the fields. Furthermore, he shared water and tools. However, trust took time. Thus, patience mattered. Meanwhile, hope grew daily.
The valley changed its name. Moreover, people smiled again. However, lessons stayed strong. Therefore, stories spread widely. Meanwhile, peace lasted.
Kindness can change even hard hearts. Furthermore, gentle words carry power. However, courage requires action. Thus, goodness wins. Finally, love transforms fear.
A simple story with a strong lesson. This tale supports English learning through clear dialogue. Moreover, it teaches empathy and courage. However, simplicity keeps understanding easy. Therefore, learners gain confidence.